According to reports, Kemba Walker has agreed to a buyout with the Thunder and is expected to sign with the Knicks. The Celtics traded Walker along with the 2 years and $74 million left on his contract to the Thunder for Al Horford in June. Time now for Carrying the Load, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado. Let's revisit the Celtics Thunder trade that sent Walker to OKC. The Celtics traded Kemba Walker, the 16th pick in this year's draft, and a future second in exchange for Al Horford and a 2023 second-round pick. Time now for the Daily Thread. Let's bring in Chris Forsberg alongside Tom Giles. And Forsberg, I'll start with you. Now knowing that Kemba Walker is headed to New York to play for the Knicks, how do you view that trade with OKC?
Yeah, so I'll be interested to see the final buyout numbers and how much money Kemba gave up. Like, I've had a couple people ask me today, do you think the Celtics, if they had been more patient, could have got to a buyout? And I just don't know. Like, you have to be traded to Oklahoma City and be facing the prospects of playing for a team that is really in this cycle of stockpiling assets to want you to get your freedom. And so I don't know if Kemba ever would have got to the point in Boston where he would have been willing to think about that. But certainly the situation changed. And, look, we'll see what happens with Al Horford's contract and how good Al is this year. And it's certainly fair to revisit. My bigger concern was that Oklahoma was going to turn around and trade Kemba for a first-round pick. And then it would have been like, okay, they moved too quick to get off that money. Now I just think, it was a pain point you had to take in order to start this transition process, which we know now has grown into this whole idea of maintaining flexibility for the future.
So this is where you go back to, and I remember right after the trade was made, and Chris Mannix questioned it. He said, I think they kind of moved a little too quickly on this Kemba Walker deal. You maybe could have gotten more for him, or maybe this even would have been an option here with the buyout situation. I think the one thing, though, that I look at today is there's a report out there that Kemba Walker is going to be getting $8 million from the Knicks. $8 million, which is 25% of what he was playing for last year. I mean, that's tremendous value. If the Celtics can get Kemba Walker back at $8 million, yeah, would love that. So that's just kind of the kick in the pants right there, seeing that number.
Forsberg, when you take a look at where Al Horford comes in, how much does he tip the scale for you in this Kemba Walker trade?
We'll find out. And so Al didn't play a whole lot last year. He got a chance to sort of rehabilitate and get that knee healthy. We'll see if he's any fresher. But, look, he's older, and he's not going to be the 30-year-old Al Horford you signed back in 2016. And so my expectations are pretty low. But if he can provide a veteran presence, if he can help nurture along the development of Robert Williams. But the most important part is you got to get off that money before next season. So whether it's at the trade deadline, whether it's early into next summer, like the Celtics, he's only partially guaranteed next season. They've got to find a home for him. And my fear is, do they have to use another first-round pick to get off Al's money? In which case now you've spent 2 first-round picks to essentially get off Kemba's money and start the process of hunting that next free agent. But I guess if you're the Celtics, you're crossing your fingers and hoping that Al's got a little something left in the tank. I just think that remains to be seen.
Yeah, the thing with Al Horford at this point, right, if he's going to be a developmental player, a guy who can kind of help some of the young guys, who can help Robert Williams per se, that means that tells me right there that the Celtics are completely playing for 2022, 2023, which I think we all kind of feel like that's the spot they're in anyways. But that's why Al Horford would be here in some sort of mentorship role, and that's kind of the best you're going to get.
Yeah, I do feel like Al Horford coming back to Boston is more like a locker room move than anything else. The Celtics added depth to their front court today, reportedly signing former Celtics Enes Kanter to a 1-year deal, according to the Globe's Adam Himmelsbach. And the deal is worth $2.7 million. Forsberg is very excited about this. Kanter, who spent last season with the Blazers, averaged 8 points and 7 rebounds for Boston during the 2019-2020 season. Just how will the Celtics fill out the rest of the roster? Are the Celtics positioning themselves for a big three? Here's what Forsberg had to say about the potential for a big three. With a Tatum, Brown, Beal core and some intriguing young pieces on the roster, Boston seemingly would be an attractive destination for the sort of championship-chasing veterans who are currently flocking to the Lakers and Nets. So filling out the roster isn't a major concern, but coming off what could be a down year might hinder the perception of what Boston's ceiling is, despite the addition of new star players. Forsberg, you cannot contain your excitement about Enes Kanter returning to Boston. What's your reaction to this move?
Yeah, so look, I think it's in one way, I think it's hilarious because the Celtics spent a first-round pick last year, which ended up being Desmond Bane, one of the better rookies in this class, to get off Kanter's money, and now they're turning around and paying him essentially half of what they paid him before to come back. And now, look, I get it. Brad Stevens is just looking to fill out this roster with a veteran minimum guy. It's not going to cost a lot in terms of what he counts against the cap. You hear that $2.6 million number. It's like 1.7 that they owe in terms of the cap. And look, he's deep depth, and I think he's a good locker room guy. And I think just like we just talked about with Al Horford, he'll be a good presence there. But ultimately, he is what he is. He's a bridge gap until whatever comes next. And so I think it's just, give credit to Brad Stevens. Like, the Celtics made a bad decision trying to get off that contract. It takes a lot to sort of acknowledge that you made a mistake and just bring him back. And look, maybe there was just nothing else they could do. But I am hopeful that Enes will keep things light. He'll be a phenomenal TikTok presence during the season. And maybe you'll catch him on the Celtics Talk podcast, hanging out and giving us insight into the season that might not otherwise be a whole lot of fun if the Celtics struggle along the way.
Yeah, I do hope, for your sake, that the Enes Kanter podcast is back on, featuring Chris Forsberg, hosted by Chris Forsberg. But Forsberg, I'm looking at this, and the other name that comes out, it's the wrong former Celtic. Aaron Baines gets waived by the Toronto Raptors. I want Aaron Baines back. There's some toughness there, some grit, someone that can help protect Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown when they're getting pushed around a little bit. Why not Aaron Baines?
Why not both?
With that? Well, how many big men do you need? You don't have a point guard. You can't stack it with 7 big men. This isn't 12th grade.
You're the 8th best team in the Eastern Conference. Let Enes Kanter handle the ball for all I care. But I would love to have Aaron Baines back. If we're getting bands back together, let's go all out on this thing. You guys know I've sat here for months and said Isaiah Thomas makes no sense for this team. I'm kind of swinging in the opposite direction now. If you're just going to muddle your way through a season, let's bring back the whole band. Let's just bring back the Brad Stevens All-Stars and try to have some fun. Yeah,
I could just bring everybody back. We know that the Celtics, they're looking to build around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Forsberg, what direction should the organization take, or maybe could they take, when it comes to building around those 2 superstars?
Yeah, so the whole thing here for me, and look, if you're looking to next season, here's the key. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown got to go up a level, even if it's not a competitive season where you're not in the contending mix for a title. Maybe you wiggle in there if Jason Tatum comes back from Tokyo and is somewhat of a top 10, top 5 player. If Jaylen Brown comes off this injury and gets back to being his all-star self. If Aaron Nesmith and Romeo Langford carve out roles. But I think it's obvious they're playing the long game here. And whether it's Bradley Beal, whether it's another, impact talent that is out there, the Celtics are waiting for the next guy to come along before they sort of shift up and go back to compete mode. And so even as someone who just covers this team, that's a little bit frustrating because 2 years ago, you're knocking on the door of the NBA Finals. And now it's like you're stuck in neutral a little bit and you're waiting for that move. And I get it. Some of the moves that Danny Ainge made late in his tenure have compounded the path forward. And Brad Stevens has to undo that shoelace knot a little bit here and start finding out how to get him back on the right track. But ultimately it comes down to this team with success will be dictated by how good is Jason Tatum, how good is Jaylen Brown, and how good can those younger players, Peyton Pritchard, Aaron Nesmith, how much can they go up? How much do they become desirable trade assets to allow you to go seek other talent? But, that's for right now, in the absence of other moves, no offense, Enes Kanter and Josh Richardson and everybody else. That's sort of what I'm looking for next season.
Podcast is off again. You're not getting after that comment right there. I'll say this, because we read that excerpt from Forsberg, which is on the website. I read the entire thing, and I got to tell you, it's a lot more discouraging than we're making it out. I mean, for them to execute the salary cap gymnastics and then to somehow fill out a 12-man roster after kind of divvying up all the money, I'm almost looking at it saying, well, you know what? Stay flexible, but at the same time, you need to start thinking about building around your 2 stars and putting just a solid group around them. I mean, would you say that the Milwaukee Bucks had a big 3? I wouldn't go that far. The Phoenix Suns, I don't think they had a big 3. They just had the right guys, the right depth, the right players, veterans around them to make that work. And I'm starting to lean in that direction that maybe that's the best way to go.
See, I look at the rest of the league, and you always think in order to win an NBA title, you have to have a big 3. I think of the Lakers, I think of the Nets, I think of the Miami Heat. Forsberg, do they need a big 3 here in Boston, or could they really do it with Jaylen and Jason and putting the right pieces around them?
So, I thought there was a chance that if they had Jalen and Jason and they brought back Evan Fournier and they extended Marcus Smart and they extended Robert Williams, you could have sort of a dual path where, okay, last year didn't give you great confidence that that group was going to work, but maybe you get into the season, see how it is. Can Marcus Smart be your starting point guard? Can Evan Fournier be that sort of third option? And then you assess where it's at. Instead, they've sort of already made the transition here where it's clear they feel like they need another piece. And so they're sort of waiting for whether it's Bradley Beal or whoever's next. But I do think, again, I don't think, like, when, as Giles alluded to, if you read the article, the number of moves you have to make to get to $41 million to get a Bradley Beal next summer is prohibitive. That means no Marcus Smart. It means moving off Al Horford. It means moving off of Romeo Langford. It means, like, potentially trading your first round pick next year. And it's a lot of headaches. But I do think, like, the Celtics, there might be a path where Marcus Smart is here and Robert Williams is here. And maybe they just go get a $20 million player to fill out this roster. Maybe it's Alonzo Ball type that they were clearly interested in at the start of this free agency. They just got to figure out who that is. Do they go all in, and do you need Bradley Beal to keep Jason Tatum happy? Or is there a lesser player, maybe a younger player that fits well with Jason and Jalen that can sort of bring this thing to the future that maybe isn't necessarily a definitive big three, but it's a big two with some really good pieces around them?
So just for the record, real quick, I want to say he's making me feel more confident now that you can do it. You can trade away all those guys and keep Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. That's fine. You can do that and bring the third guy. I'm back on board with that.
Yeah, see, now Forsberg has already convinced me from the last 2 weeks that Bradley Beal is not going to be here. So I'm already sold in on the two and putting the supporting cast around them.